Usually, when you step into the world of business strategy, there's this expectation of like absolute precision.
Oh, totally. Hard numbers everywhere.
Right. You talk about revenue, and there's a spreadsheet with a highly specific, undeniable number.
Yeah, or supply chain logistics, where you can literally point to a physical truck.
Exactly. Moving goods from, warehouse A to distribution center B. The concepts are visible, they're concrete, and you can measure them.
They're tangible.
Right. But then you hear the term customer experience, or CX, and suddenly all of that precision just evaporates into the fog.
It really does. It becomes this amorphous blob.
It's so vague. So today we're doing a deep dive into why CX is arguably the most universally agreed upon buzzword in corporate history.
And why it almost never translates into actual systemic change.
Yes. And to do this, we're grounding our deep dive in some really fascinating observations from Tobias Reidenhag. He's the head of design at Intunio, which is this UX design and development studio based out of Gothenburg, Sweden.
Really smart team over there.
Oh, incredibly smart. They spend their days in the absolute trenches of building digital products. And in this 2026 article, Tobias points out a massive disconnect between how companies talk about the customer and how they actually build for them.
And, the paradox we're looking at here is entirely systemic, because you'd be hard-pressed to find a single executive who doesn't publicly champion the idea that, like, a flawless customer experience is their #1 competitive advantage.
Oh, they all say it. It's in every pitch deck.
Right. Boardrooms talk about it, quarterly reports highlight it, and companies invest, millions in tracking it. But Reidenhag points out that the stumbling block starts at the absolute foundational level. The definition of the word itself is completely fractured.
Fractured how? Like, depending on the department.
Exactly. If you walk into a marketing department, CX is defined as brand perception, right? Tone of voice.
Okay, sure.
But walk into operations, and suddenly CX means delivery speed. It means return processing.
Ah, right. And if you go to customer support?
Then it's entirely about ticket resolution metrics and hold times.
So basically, the definition is completely dependent on which department's budget you're currently standing in.
Precisely. That is exactly the issue. But the core insight from Intunio that kind of cuts through all this fragmentation is this really crucial distinction between perception and creation.
Okay, let's unpack this. What do you mean by perception versus creation?
Well, regardless of how a specific company wields the term, CX almost universally describes how an experience is perceived by the end user. It's about feelings, reactions. It's rarely about the mechanical reality of how that experience is actually constructed by the organization.
Oh, wow. Okay, so if we look at this structurally, it sounds like CX is the equivalent of a weather report.
A weather report.
Yeah, think about it. A weather report is incredibly valuable for telling you that a storm is coming, right?
Yeah.
It tells you it's raining and that the conditions out there are miserable. It's a language of ambition and direction, sure.
Right, observation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But a weather report is completely useless as an umbrella. You can't use a barometer to stop the rain. It's a diagnostic tool. It's not an execution tool.
That is a perfect analogy. And what's fascinating here is the psychological trap this creates for companies.
How so?
Because organizations are so deeply addicted to the safety of measuring that weather report, they do something highly illogical. They try to hire someone to control the weather.
Right, they make it a job title?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They create this isolated role, the CX manager or the CX designer, and tracking perception feels like really productive work, right?
Oh, sure, sending out surveys and all that.
Exactly. Companies spin up these massive initiatives to measure Net Promoter Scores. They run sentiment analysis algorithms over social media. They do endless post-purchase surveys.
Right.
And they fundamentally confuse the act of measuring the customer's pain with the incredibly complex, politically fraught work of actually eliminating that pain.
That brings up a really interesting point about the people who are actually hired into these roles. Like, let's look at the day-to-day reality of a CX manager.
Oh, it's exhausting.
I bet. They're running these extensive workshops. They're compiling just massive amounts of qualitative research.
Mountains of it.
And they create these beautiful, highly detailed customer journey maps, right? The ones that stretch across the entire wall of a conference room.
Oh, yeah, with all the sticky notes.
Exactly. And they're finding the exact friction points. Like, they know exactly where a user abandons a digital cart or gets totally lost in a phone tree.
They're doing incredibly heavy analytical lifting. But Intunio's critique highlights a fatal structural flaw in how these roles are set up.
Which is?
The CX role is inherently strategic and analytical, but it is entirely divorced from the levers of implementation.
Wait. let me push back on this.
Go for it.
Wait, so if a CX manager identifies a massive glaring pain point for the customer, they literally don't have the tools to fix it themselves.
Usually, no. The person mapping the customer journey rarely has commit access to the code base.
Oh, wow.
Right. They don't own the back-end payment architecture. They don't control the logistical contracts with shipping partners. They are tasked with fixing a reality that they have zero operational authority to touch.
But, I mean, modern companies run on data, right? Data is supposed to be the great equalizer.
In theory, sure.
So if a CX manager owns the data, and that data definitively proves that, say, a specific flaw in the checkout API is causing a massive spike in user drop-off.
Right. Lost revenue.
Yeah, lost revenue. Shouldn't that empirical proof give them the ultimate authority over the engineering team to just fix it? Why does the data fail to translate into operational power?
Because in most corporate structures, authority isn't derived from insight. It's derived from budget ownership and technical accountability.
Oh, well, that hurts to hear.
Yeah. The data might be undeniable, but the engineering team isn't evaluated on the CX manager's metrics.
Right. Their bonuses are tied to other stuff.
Exactly. Their bonuses are tied to system uptime, feature velocity, security compliance. If the CX manager bursts into the room demanding an immediate overhaul of the checkout API,
The engineering lead is just going to point to a product roadmap that's already locked and fully funded for the next 3 quarters.
you got it. The CX manager fundamentally acts as an internal lobbyist. They have to rely on soft power, persuasion, just begging to get their insights prioritized by the people who actually operate the machinery.
So the CX manager is essentially the building inspector testing the smoke alarms.
Yes.
They have the clipboard, they have the data showing exactly where the fire hazards are, but they're not the electricians.
Nope.
They aren't allowed to actually open the walls and rewire the house so it stops catching on fire.
That is the exact structural dependency we're talking about.
Right.
And it directly explains why so many massive, heavily funded CX initiatives simply fade away without making a dent in the market.
It must be so frustrating for them.
Beyond frustrating. And the article is very clear that this failure is almost never due to a lack of competence or willpower from the CX team.
Right, their maps are good.
Their JD maps are highly accurate. The pain points they identify are the exact correct ones to target.
But the actual tangible experience that the customer goes through remains completely static.
Glacially slow to change.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I mean, think about the dynamics of your own workplace for a second. Have you ever sat in a cross-functional meeting where every single person around the table completely agreed on the diagnosis of a problem?
Oh, everyone's nodding.
Right. The data is clear. The customer feedback is unanimous. Everybody agrees. But absolutely no one in that room possesses the structural authority or the budget to actually pull the lever to fix the underlying system.
It creates this profoundly demoralizing gap between insight and action. The organization is just paralyzed by its own departmental boundaries.
They have all the knowledge of what's broken, but the mechanisms to fix it are locked behind different reporting lines.
Yeah. And Tobias Reidenhag captures this paralysis beautifully by introducing the concept of an execution engine.
An execution engine.
Right. He uses a Swedish term in the original text, but it translates perfectly to execution engine. And the core argument is that traditional CX departments completely lack this engine.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of this execution engine, because I think this is where the theory really hits the concrete.
Sure.
The actual experience a customer has isn't shaped by a strategy document, right? Or an executive mandate.
Definitely not.
The experience is shaped by, like, the latency of a database call. It's shaped by the physical unboxing of a product.
Yes. Or whether the inventory management system talks to the front-end interface fast enough so that a customer doesn't buy an item that went out of stock 3 seconds ago.
Exactly. If your back-end inventory API doesn't sync with the shopping cart in real time, the customer experiences a failure.
And the CX team will see a massive spike in angry support tickets.
Right, and a plummeting net promoter score.
And they'll diligently map this failure on their journey board. But they can't rewrite the API connection. They don't own the execution engine.
So they have this highly sophisticated diagnostic dashboard that perfectly accurately tells them the engine is failing, but they are physically locked out of the engine bay.
Precisely. And if this isolated department model is fundamentally doomed by this insight-to-action gap, then it requires a complete dismantling of how executives currently view the problem.
We need a new mental model.
We do. We can't treat CX as an activity. The argument Intunio puts forward is that organizations must stop viewing customer experience as a discipline, or a department, or a standalone project.
What should they view it as then?
They need to start recognizing it purely as an emergent result.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. You can't do CX.
No, you can't.
It's like trying to do happiness,
That's a great way to put it.
You can't just put be happy on a to-do list
Yeah.
and execute it as a standalone task. You have to do other things well, like sleep, exercise, see your friends.
And happiness is the byproduct.
Exactly. Health is the emergent byproduct of all those underlying biological systems operating efficiently.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the shift from viewing CX as an activity to viewing it as a result completely changes the organizational architecture.
Because you can't directly engineer an emergent property.
Right, you can't isolate it in a vacuum. Good CX is the natural consequence of disparate, highly complex internal systems functioning together with absolute cohesion.
So when your logistics network, your software engineering, your supply chain, and your customer support protocols are tightly integrated and communicating without friction.
The end user perceives that alignment. They experience it as a seamless interaction.
But treating CX as an isolated department is just a fundamental misunderstanding of business architecture.
Completely. It means a CEO yelling at their teams to do better CX is totally futile if they aren't willing to do the excruciating work of tearing down the internal silos that prevent those systems from communicating in the first place.
And this forces us to look at who is actually responsible for tearing down those silos and rebuilding the systems.
Exactly. Who are the actual builders?
Right. If the CX manager is just pointing at the symptoms, who operates the execution engine?
Well, Reidenhag's analysis points directly to the granular, highly tactical disciplines that actually have their hands on the foundational materials of the business.
Who are we talking about?
We're looking at service design and UX design, user experience design.
Okay. The real heroes here. These are the disciplines that are fundamentally tasked with construction rather than just observation.
Exactly. They work on how the experience is created, not just how it's described. Take a service designer, for instance.
What do they do differently?
They aren't just looking at the customer's pain. They're mapping the complex backstage processes. The employee workflows, the third-party vendor integrations, the internal software tools.
The stuff the customer never sees.
Right, but those internal realities directly cause the pain on the front stage. They're mapping the operational reality.
And then the UX designers.
The UX designers are taking that operational reality and mapping it to the user's mental model through the digital interface.
Oh, so they're the ones actually writing the interaction logic.
Exactly. They're determining exactly how a backend system failure is communicated to the user in the UI. Or, even better, designing the flow so the failure is bypassed entirely.
So they're making the concrete, irreversible decisions.
Yes. They dictate the physics of the user's reality.
So basically, the CX person points at the mountain, but the UX and service designers are the ones actually building the road to get over it.
That's it. To go back to your earlier analogy, the service designers and the UX designers are the electricians and the structural engineers.
Right. They're pulling the permits, opening up the drywall, and completely rewiring the internal circuitry of the house.
So that the systems can handle the electrical load without tripping the breakers. They hold the operational authority to change the environment.
And that's why Intunio argues so strongly for empowering these specific roles, right?
Yes. When you take the deep empathetic insights of user research and you couple them directly with the execution engines of service and UX design, you finally bridge that gap between insight and action.
You embed the customer's needs directly into the product development pipeline.
Exactly, rather than keeping them isolated in a purely advisory CX department.
This structural shift is massive. It means the people identifying the friction actually have the tools to systematically eliminate it.
Right. You stop chasing the vague ambition of a better experience, and you start actively engineering the internal systems that make a bad experience impossible.
And when you achieve that level of internal systemic alignment, the customer experience just takes care of itself.
It really does. It's a natural, inevitable consequence. It's no longer a metric you have to artificially inflate or like a goal you desperately chase at the end of a product cycle.
It just becomes the default state of interacting with your organization.
Precisely.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dives journey, we've really dismantled a deeply entrenched corporate myth today.
We have. We started with a language of ambition, a buzzword that traps companies into measuring perception while totally neglecting creation.
And we examined the architectural trap of the toothless CX manager, just paralyzed by an abundance of insight and a total absence of operational power.
We identified the critical missing component, the execution engine.
Right. And we explored the paradigm shift required to view customer experience not as an isolated discipline to be managed, but as the ultimate emergent result of empowered service and UX design operating in harmony.
It fundamentally changes the lens through which you analyze every single interaction you have with the business.
It really does. And I think it leaves us with a fascinating, maybe slightly unsettling final thought to consider for you, the listener, regarding this whole Intunio philosophy.
Oh, definitely. If a seamless, intuitive customer experience is nothing more than the natural byproduct of an organization's internal architecture functioning perfectly together.
Does that mean a bad customer experience is really just a company's internal dysfunctions, departmental rivalries, and siloed office politics bleeding out into public view?
It's a great question. It means that every time you find yourself trapped in an endless automated phone loop or fighting with a website that just will not let you cancel a subscription, you aren't just experiencing poor design.
No, you're literally feeling the friction of their internal turf wars. You're interacting with a fragmented org chart.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you encounter one of those maddening customer service black holes, try not to view it merely as a technical failure. Look at it as a symptom, the very public symptom of a broken execution engine.
Until next time.